Government has denied reports that plans for the Sizewell C nuclear power plant are under review. There were reports that Sizewell C was one of many major projects being reviewed as the government looks to cut public spending. But Downing Street quashed those reports yesterday. In fact, Rishi Sunak's spokesman said that the Prime Minister hoped to get a deal over the line as soon as possible, adding that talks with private firms over funding had been constructive and were still ongoing. No surprises there, folks. We are, after all, facing an energy emergency. So should we welcome this news? Well, joining me to discuss this is the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, I thank you very much for your time. Do you welcome the government's decision not to scrap the Sizewell C project? I mean, could you just put it into perspective for my viewers? How much of an impact would this project have on securing Britain's energy independence?
Well, quite a bit, because if it is built, then it's about 7% of the electricity consumption in the UK. So that's a decent chunk. But I think we also have to recognise that even if the go-ahead is given tomorrow and the funders have come in and all that sort of thing, it's probably going to be about 10 years before it's online. So whilst I do think it's a good thing, at the same time we need to address some of the energy security matters earlier than that. For example, we've now got with Rolls-Royce the small-scale nuclear power stations, which can be built both much quicker and more cheaply. And we can't just carry on building intermittent, the wind, without the backup. And that backup piece is the bit that seems to have been too long forgotten by the decision makers. And that's one of the reasons that we're in difficulties now. After all, this winter we are, I'm sure, going to be starting the last of our coal-fired power stations up. Well, that's fine, at least we've got some. It's not going to help you on the climate change. And so it's actually getting some of this quicker backup, the smaller scale backup done and underway very quickly is where I think the attention also needs to go as far as government is concerned.
And Angela, talking about all of these projects, the government likes to wax lyrical, as you well know, as far as its net zero agenda is concerned, that actually it's going to be a massive job creator. Would nuclear power plants, like even the small-scale reactors that you mentioned there, would there be a big investment for jobs and opportunities in this country?
Yes, they would. You see, what I envisage, what many of us envisage, is that where the attention now needs to be paid is on not just one small-scale nuclear reactor, but a whole series of them. As I say, they take about 2 years to build, so that makes them much more attractive for investors, because investors have not got to wait a long time, 10 years before the thing starts operating. We also are running very close anyway to our electricity production. By close, I mean, demand and supply, because we cannot assume that we can import through our interconnectors from Europe, because most of Europe is in a much harder situation than we are. And so it's not going to have any surplus power to export. So what I think would be the best thing for government to do is, yes, by all means continue with Sizewell as long as you can get funding for it, because those big power stations, because of the cost and delay, tend to be built off either our government's balance sheet or somebody else. After all, the one at Hinkley is being built off the French balance sheet. That's a tricky thing to do. But if you can get, say, a dozen of the smaller ones built, you put them on the same site as our existing nuclear power stations, because then you've got all the connections. As I say, £2 billion in 2 years and you're up and running is something that the private sector will invest in. So let's do that as well.
Yeah, and Angela, then I wonder what you say to some of my viewers who are concerned, actually, that we've got the likes of the French coming over and building these kinds of things, when they're saying, well, actually, is this not an argument for the United Kingdom to have its own nationalised, state-owned energy company that's able to do these things themselves?
Yes, there has been a case for some time for us to have. In fact, we used to have, of course, the UK used to have all this capability. We were early off when we built our existing nuclear power stations. We did a good job. They've been safe, they've been reliable, and they've run for actually considerably longer than they were originally intended. So I don't think anybody should think that the UK has not done a good job. It has. But then, of course, whatever it was, 20, 30 years, almost fallow, 20 years fallow, where nuclear became one of these things you didn't talk about, people were worried about, you didn't invest. Actually, that was a very stupid situation to let ourselves get into. But you can't unmake the past. What you can do is you can make something of the future. And inside Rolls-Royce is a very strong team, very big development has been going on there. They've built, after all, nuclear power into submarines and the like for many, many years. So we've got the knowledge. Yeah. They can build out the capacity. And you're absolutely right. Then it is, something that is much more within the UK's control. I'm not a great one for nationalising, but I am a great one for saying, let's do it if we've got the knowledge and let's do it here. So, use our people, create our jobs, our technology. And that's where I think we can go and go strongly with those small-scale power stations, and quickly, and speed is important.
And Angela, I tell you what, if it was in my gift, I'd make you Baroness Knight and have you as Energy Secretary. I tell you that much. But former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight there, thank you as ever. Unite National Officer for Energy, Simon Coop, said this. He said, at a time of chronic energy insecurity and perilous energy costs, why on earth would the government even consider pulling the promised investment in the Sizewell C nuclear reactor? To allow such speculation to grow is irresponsible and jeopardises the future of the plant. Cutting back on Sizewell not only undermines the UK's commitment to achieve net zero, but threatens our ability to keep the lights on in the future. It's nonsensical. Far from reneging on the promise to build Sizewell C, the government should be investing in the jobs, energy stability and diversity that new build nuclear energy provides. It's not often I agree with trade unions, but there we are. I do this time.